I saw everything. Everything. My hand was clenched so tight my knuckles looked like sun-bleached bones. I didn't even notice at first. It was only when the tingling in my fingers hit that I realized I had a death grip on the edge of the kitchen countertop. Air moved around me, whirring fridge, faint traffic outside, a breeze through the open window carrying the distant sound of kids playing somewhere down the block. But I felt removed, numb, like I stood in a silent vacuum. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the plain, unfiltered realization of the moment. It was a Tuesday evening. The weekend's empties, beer bottles from a small Sunday BBQ, still cluttered the kitchen trash. I remember the smell, old grease from that night's burgers, and a stale hint of leftover coleslaw. Mundane, everyday scents, and yet in that moment, they seemed to sharpen and burn in the back of my nostrils. My mind echoed with one sentence over and over. He was 100 times more passionate. I had opened Linda's laptop by accident, or so I told myself. That was the official story in my head. But the deeper truth was that I sensed something off for weeks. She'd grown distant, phone locked to a degree that made me suspicious. The older me might have brushed it off, trusting her absolutely. But I was no longer the older me. Instinct tightened its jaws around my gut. I told myself I was just checking if the Wi-Fi was acting up, maybe verifying some email. Instead, I saw the chat window left open. I saw her words to a friend, typed in that same neat style that used to send me sweet notes. Ryan is so much more exciting than David. In bed, in everything. My breath caught on that line. I thought maybe I misread it. But no, it was all there. Vivid. Brutal. The message was from earlier that same day. And then, in horrifying detail, she'd said something about how he took her in a way her husband never could. I stood there, staring at that phrase. My hand began to shake, but the rest of me froze. If someone had walked in at that second, they might have thought I was a statue, an inanimate figure pinned to reality by a single horrifying fact. My wife was telling someone about their night together. Ryan. I felt like my mind dredged up every memory of him at once. The day I first met him, how he showed me some new VPN service. He was the son of Linda's old friend from California. He's like family, Linda used to say. I let him come over to watch football on Sundays, shared beers, treated him like a younger cousin. My kids even called him Uncle Ryan. The difference in age between him and Linda was 14 years, and yet it never struck me as odd. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I wanted to see the best in people, see the best in her. I walked out of the kitchen, laptop still open on the counter. At that moment, I didn't fully register my steps. It was as if my legs moved me mechanically, carrying me to the living room. The overhead light flickered. A bulb half burned out. It cast an odd swaying shadow across the floor. My reflection showed up in the TV screen. A man mid-40s, gray starting at the temples, expression stiff, like a badly carved sculpture. I pressed my palm against my face. For a second, I forgot to breathe. That's when I saw her phone on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a new message, probably from the same chat thread, or from one of her friends. I couldn't read it from where I stood, but I saw the name. Ryan. Security. The ironically playful contact name Linda had given him because he worked in cybersecurity. My mouth tasted sour. There was no denying it. Not anymore. I smelled the faint trace of her perfume lingering in the air, something with vanilla and sandalwood. She always wore it for special occasions. Now that same scent made my stomach turn. She wore it for him, I thought. The dryness in my throat turned sharp. My face burned with anger, but it was a quiet, hollow kind of rage. No yelling, no immediate confrontation. It felt as though my entire emotional system short-circuited, leaving only raw static. The hum of the air conditioner cut in, pushing a slight chill into the room. I stepped out onto the front porch. Evening light was fading, the sky turning that golden pink you get in the Pacific Northwest this time of year. A breeze rustled the hedges. Our neighbor's dog barked twice, then silence again. In that hush, I recalled every small detail of Linda's laughter around Ryan. All the time she'd scolded me for not paying attention to her, for not being spontaneous enough. I'd laugh it off, say, "See, Mon, we're just comfortable with each other. That's love, right?" I never realized she had found passion somewhere else. In the shape of a younger man who came and went through our door as though he'd always belonged. I closed my eyes. The memory of the last conversation I'd had with Ryan resurfaced. We were sitting in the backyard, sipping beer. He told me about his job in penetration testing, how he simulates hacking attempts to find vulnerabilities. He said, "I guess you can't leave your back door unguarded. You never know who'll get in." At the time, it seemed like a typical joking reference to his work. Now, I see the double meaning, unintentional or not. My jaw tensed. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and a passing whiff of grilled meat from a nearby cookout. But inside my chest, everything was stale and rotting. I don't remember sleeping that night. If I did, it was a cold, restless doze on the living room couch. Linda came home late, said something about traffic, then fell silent when she saw my face. She asked me what was wrong. I looked at her. She took a step back, probably seeing the look in my eyes. But I spoke only one word. No. My throat felt too tight for more. She stared, confused, maybe worried, but I turned away. In my mind, I was replaying the lines from her chat. I wonder if she noticed how rigid I was, how my fists clenched in the pockets of my jeans. She tried again. "David, you okay?" I repeated, "No." Then I walked upstairs. Even that was an act of enormous self-control, because part of me wanted to grab her by the shoulders and demand an explanation. Another part of me just wanted to vanish. I didn't look at her in bed that night. She kept shifting, sighing, turning. Normally, I'd ask, "What's wrong?" or rub her back, but not that time. Eventually, she gave up and lay still. Around 2 a.m., I went downstairs and stared out the window for an hour. The sky was dark, starless, city lights bleaching the horizon. A sense of unreality drenched me. Our living room photos, me and her on our wedding day, me lifting her in my arms by the beach, felt like relics from another life. A part of me wanted to smash them. But I didn't. I just stood there, my arms at my sides, so tense I was practically trembling. I remembered how Linda and I used to talk about building the future, traveling, maybe buying an RV and driving across the country after the kids left home. It all seemed worthless now. She said he's 100 times more passionate. I got through the next day like a robot. Ate cereal with the kids, told them yes when they asked if they could stay at a friend's place after school, told Linda no when she asked if I'd be home for dinner. I went to work. The hum of fluorescent lights in my office felt harsher than usual, or maybe my senses were just raw. My coworker Martin asked if I was all right. I gave him a curt nod. Couldn't bring myself to say more than that. Everything inside me was locked down. Emotions. I was too numb to cry. Too numb even to rage. My mind spun with one question. How long? Linda texted me around lunchtime. "We need to talk." I typed back a single word. No. I wanted to keep her at arm's length, at least until I got a handle on this. My entire life was turned upside down in a day. Or maybe it had been upside down for much longer. I was just too blind to see it. I remembered all the times Linda came home late, claiming she'd been meeting a friend. How many of those evenings were spent with Ryan? At some point that afternoon, I found myself gripping the edge of my desk, knuckles white again. He was 100 times more passionate. That line wouldn't leave me. I felt like less than a man, overshadowed by a younger, more energetic rival. My pride bled. I told myself to breathe, but it felt like inhaling shards of glass. Half the office was empty. People working from home. The hush of corporate air conditioning pressed in. I caught my reflection on my monitor screen, eyes bloodshot, face set in grim lines. My phone vibrated. Another text from Linda. I slid it off the desk, ignoring it. No, my only answer. After work, I drove aimlessly. The setting sun lit the sky in a fiery orange. My arms felt heavy on the steering wheel. I ended up at a small diner on the outskirts of town. I remembered going there once with Linda a long time ago. The smell of frying bacon and stale coffee slapped me back to memories. Our first year of marriage, when we could barely afford a nicer place. I didn't realize I was shaking until the waitress asked if I was feeling okay. I only nodded, my standard response for that day. I nursed a coffee for half an hour, letting the acrid heat burn my tongue. Something about that physical discomfort felt more tangible than the emotional numbness. That night, I slept in the guest room. Linda knocked on the door. "David, please." She tried the handle, but I'd locked it. She whispered, "Let me in." I stared at the blank ceiling. I heard her breathing outside the door, shallow and anxious. Finally, her footsteps receded. I exhaled. My mind drifted back to that chat window, her words describing how Ryan made her feel so alive. Another wave of that surreal emptiness filled me, like a vacuum in my chest. By the third day, I started speaking again, but only to the kids, simple words of reassurance. Yes, when they asked for a ride to soccer practice. No, when they wondered if something was wrong. Linda hovered around me, eyes rimmed red from crying, but I avoided her gaze. She tried to put her hand on my shoulder. I just stepped away. "David," she pleaded. "Please, say something." I forced a single response. "No." She looked like she might break. But so did I, so I left the house. That's how I survived that early shock. Not by facing it, but by refusing to engage with her at all. Inside me, a storm brewed. I wanted to know the details, when it started, where it happened, how she justified it. But at the same time, I dreaded hearing her say it out loud. The pain of comparing myself to him was already unbearable. I felt impotent, worthless, overshadowed by this younger, tech-savvy man who'd strolled into my house with a friendly grin and stolen the warmth of my wife's bed. I think it was 2 weeks before Linda cornered me in the living room. She waited until the kids went to a friend's place for the weekend. She positioned herself between me and the front door. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her cheeks blotchy from crying. I could smell her perfume again, that same vanilla sandalwood blend. My stomach churned. She tried to speak. "David, we can't keep pretending this isn't happening." I stared at her. Then, quietly, I let out a single yes. Her eyes widened, maybe relieved I was finally responding. "I want you to know it was one time," she said. It was stupid. She broke off, trembling. "You can hate me. I won't blame you. Just talk to me, please." I felt a dull ache in my temples. "No," I said, pushing past her toward the door. My voice tremored with anger, but I kept it short. Her breath caught, and she followed me halfway, trying to say more. I stepped outside and breathed the fresh air as though surfacing from underwater. Inside, I could hear her soft sobbing. I spent that evening at a bar with a couple of old friends, Greg and Joel, guys who'd known us for 20 years. We used to double date back in college. I hadn't planned on telling them, but after my third beer, it all came out. I gave them the facts. No drama, no high-volume meltdown, just the calm, bitter truth. Linda slept with Ryan, younger guy, someone I thought of as practically family. That might be the first moment it all felt real to me. Hearing myself say those words in a bar's dim light, with some country rock song playing overhead, Greg's eyes went wide. Joel's face hardened. They didn't judge me, didn't try to sugarcoat it. They just listened. No one made a joke, no one tried to lighten the mood. Silence hovered over us. When I finally left, they followed me outside, hands on my shoulders, telling me I deserved better. telling me to stand my ground, do what I had to do. There was a sense of camaraderie in their support. I'd always thought friends might shy away from such an ugly situation. But they didn't. They were there. Before I got into my car, Greg said, "Come to my place if you can't stand to go home." I paused, considered it. But I needed to see Linda's face, needed to look in her eyes one more time that night, even if only to confirm how broken we'd become. When I arrived home, she was waiting on the couch. She'd been crying. I could see the tracks of tears reflecting in the dim glow of a single lamp. She whispered, "I'm sorry." I stood there, heavy-limbed and silent. Then, in a low voice, I said no and turned off the lamp. I went upstairs. She stayed below, probably too paralyzed by guilt or confusion to do anything else. The next few days felt like slow poison. I was rotting from the inside out, but life went on. I had to maintain some normal routine. Kids had school. Bills needed paying. My job required me to show up. Linda's presence in the house was a constant weight on my chest. Everything reminded me of the betrayal. The mugs in the cabinet. Did Ryan drink from them? The couch. Did they ever sit there, brushing knees when I wasn't around? Every mundane object in our home turned into a potential symbol of my humiliation. Eventually, the conversation had to happen. I'd reached a point where I couldn't pretend anymore. One night, I walked into our bedroom, found Linda sitting on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped, wearing old sweatpants and a faded t-shirt. She looked up at me. Under the overhead light, her skin appeared pallid. I could smell the faint residue of her shampoo, a vanilla note that made me cringe. My voice felt rusty when I spoke. "Yes," I said, meaning yes, we talk now. She seemed to understand and braced herself. She started, voice unsteady. I never planned this. Ryan was around a lot. He helped me with some project stuff. And she inhaled shakily. One evening, we had a few drinks, and he paid attention to me in a way I thought you didn't anymore. I stood there, arms crossed. I kept my lips pressed tight. She blinked back tears. "It was only once," she insisted. "It was a mistake. I felt you were cold and God, I'm so ashamed. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm telling you the truth." I inhaled deeply. The smell of dust in the bedroom, the faint crackle of the air vent. Every mundane detail felt magnified. "No," I said quietly, meaning no. "I don't forgive you." She clutched at her t-shirt. "Please," she whispered, tears streaming. I closed my eyes. Images of Ryan's face surfaced in my mind. That easy grin, the way he'd high-five me after a football play. I pictured them together. My stomach lurched. "I never wanted to replace you," she continued, her breath hitching. "He was just an escape. But I love you." She broke off, covering her mouth. I stared at the wall behind her, focusing on a faint crack in the paint. My heart hammered in my chest, but my words were stuck. Finally, I forced them out, one by one, in a hoarse tone. "Was he good?" She froze. Pain flickered across her face. She tried to speak, but only managed a strangled sound. My question was savage, I knew, but I had to ask. The comparison haunted me. Her chat said he was more passionate, 100 times. I wanted to rub that statement like salt in an open wound. I needed to hear her say it, or deny it. Something. She swallowed, tears shining on her cheeks. It was different," she murmured. "He's younger. More reckless. That's all." It didn't mean. I cut her off with a movement of my hand. My gaze stayed locked on her. Quietly, I asked, "Better than me?" My voice sounded almost mechanical, like I was reading off a script. She stared at the floor, silent. I nodded slowly, feeling my throat tighten to the point of agony. "Yes," I answered for her, because I already knew. Her chat logs gave me the truth. She didn't dispute it. I turned to leave. She called my name, voice fraught. "David." But I walked out. That moment started the avalanche. I told a select few old friends the entire story. Word spread among the people who'd known us for years. And lines formed. Some folks tried to remain neutral, but it's hard to stay neutral in such a raw betrayal. My friend Greg, his wife, Joel, and a handful of others all sided with me, supporting me in small but meaningful ways, inviting me over for dinners, checking in on me, offering to help with the kids if needed. Meanwhile, Linda found an ally or two among acquaintances who believed in not judging a single mistake. Our social circle fractured. We'd show up to a community event, like a potluck or a kids' game, and you'd sense the tension. Some folks physically shifting closer to me, others quietly drifting away with Linda. We never confronted each other in those public spaces. We just existed in the same orbit, two colliding worlds that had once been one. All this time, Ryan disappeared from my life. He never texted me, never came by. I heard from a friend of a friend that he felt ashamed, that he was sorry. My immediate reaction was scorn. Sorry. That's like feeling remorse after you steal a prized heirloom and wear it around town. But the truth is, I didn't even want to see him. The rage in me was so twisted, so big, that I wasn't sure what I'd do if I laid eyes on him. So maybe his silence was wise. Maybe he realized the damage was too deep to fix. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. Linda kept trying to reach me, sometimes at night. She'd knock on the guest room door, whispering, "I'm sorry," or "talk to me." Once or twice, I answered with a flat no. Other times, I just let her voice echo unanswered. My children sensed something was deeply wrong. They'd tiptoe around the house, studying our faces, confused why Dad was in the guest room. The older one, my daughter, asked Linda point-blank, "Why are you and Dad fighting?" Linda stammered some vague explanation about grown-up problems. Tears in her eyes, our daughter turned to me. "Daddy, did something bad happen?" I couldn't bring myself to lie, but I also couldn't tell the truth. So I muttered, "Yes." She stared, blinking. Then I told her, "But it's not your fault." She said nothing, just hugged me. I felt her small arms around my waist, her face pressed to my chest, and I closed my eyes, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo. My heart clenched with guilt. This was not the childhood I wanted for them. During those months, Linda and I existed in a slow dance of avoidance and forced civility for the kids' sake. We'd handle daily chores, share minimal updates about our schedules. But real words, real confessions, barely any. It was like the entire house was built of glass, and any sudden movement might shatter it. The tension gnawed at me until I finally gave in and scheduled a meeting with a divorce attorney. The day I did that, I felt a strange relief, as though acknowledging an outcome I'd dreaded for too long. I was done living in this suspended hell. I needed an escape, or closure, or both. That afternoon, Linda confronted me in the hallway. "I heard from a friend that you're seeing a lawyer. Is that true?" Her voice was trembling, eyes desperate. A million responses welled up, but I stuck to my vow of minimal speech. "Yes," I said. Her lips parted. She looked at me, waiting for a follow-up explanation that never came. Then she hugged herself, tears brimming. I'll fight for us, David," she whispered. "I love you. I don't want to lose you." I stared at her, noticing the faint lines around her eyes, the weariness in her posture. Then I said, "No." She sobbed, collapsing against the wall, sliding down until she was seated on the floor, head in her hands. I walked away, each step echoing with finality. I expected that would be the end. A slow, cold end, but an end nonetheless. Then Ryan surfaced. One evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "David, it's Ryan. I owe you an apology." I almost threw my phone against the wall. Instead, I stared at the words, the lines swimming in my vision. The next morning, a letter showed up at my office. My name scrawled on the front in neat handwriting. Inside was a single sheet, typed, "David, I know you hate me. I'd hate me too. I just want to say I never meant to destroy anything. I got caught up in something stupid. I can't fix it, but I'm sorry. Ryan. It was like a punch in the gut. My hands shook as I read it, remembering how I used to joke with Ryan, how I'd share my frustration about work, or my kids' new obsession with video games. Was that the same man who was in bed with my wife? The heartbreak morphed into a bitter swirl of anger and pity. I crumpled the letter and dropped it in the trash. By this time, the divorce attorney was discussing details: property, custody, finances. My head pounded with the swirl of legal jargon. I was exhausted, each day a slog through heartbreak and mountainous paperwork. Late one evening, after the kids were asleep, Linda quietly approached me in the living room. The lamplight cast half her face in shadow. She said, "You're really going through with this?" I took a moment, then nodded once. My face was set like stone. She inhaled shakily. "I won't fight you on it," she whispered. "But, do you hate me?" I looked away. The gentle hum of the refrigerator sounded from the kitchen. Outside, a car drove past. In a muted tone, I replied, "Yes." She flinched as though slapped. Her eyes welled with tears. She parted her lips to speak, but no words came. Eventually, she turned and walked upstairs. Something inside me stirred, an ache that recognized her sorrow. Once I would have done anything to comfort her, but that man was gone. Maybe that was my revenge. The cold withdrawal of any solace, any empathy. I wasn't proud of it, but I couldn't offer more. The pain in me was too large, the betrayal too raw. Around that time, I also confided in my siblings, 2 younger brothers who lived out of state. They'd grown up seeing Linda and me as the ideal couple, always stable, always reliable. My middle brother was furious on my behalf, offering to fly in and talk some sense into Ryan, meaning punch him, probably. The younger one just kept repeating, "Man, I can't believe it. You two were rock solid." I realized that was part of the heartbreak. People always saw Linda and me as the dependable pair, the baseline for a good marriage. No one expected an earthquake of infidelity. Least of all me. But it happened, and we were living it. The kids started noticing we didn't eat dinner together anymore. They asked me if Mom was going to move out. I tried to remain stoic, telling them, "Everything's complicated, but we both love you." Linda, for her part, tried to act as if there was still normalcy, cooking pancakes on Saturday morning, inviting the kids to watch movies. But every time I caught her eye, there was a sadness so deep it threatened to drag us both under. One day, she approached me in a low voice. "We need to discuss logistics. If we're divorcing the kids, we should talk about custody." My insides twisted at the thought. But I nodded. "Yes," I said, and we went to the dining table with a notepad. She scribbled possibilities. Maybe the kids stay with her during the week, me on weekends, or half and half. My stomach churned. The smell of ink from her pen, the scratch of it on paper, felt more final than anything before. She paused, tears in her eyes, but kept writing. I forced myself to watch, remembering the day we'd gotten married, how we said, "In sickness and in health." I never imagined this kind of sickness. She showed me the schedule. I studied it. "No," I said, meaning I wanted more time with them. She bit her lip, nodded, revised. We kept going like that for half an hour. A slow, painful negotiation about the future of our children, all because she had an affair with a man 100 times more passionate than me. I felt dead inside, as though this mechanical process was all that was left of our union. 3 days later, I was rummaging in the garage, looking for an old set of wrenches. I needed a distraction. My phone buzzed. "Greg, we're at my place. We got beer. Come over if you can." I drove across town, half on autopilot, feeling the heavy ache behind my eyes. When I arrived, Joel and a couple of other close friends were there. They sat me down, gave me a cold beer, and let me vent. I found my words, shaky at first, but eventually unstoppable. I spoke about the humiliation, the betrayal, the sense that I was overshadowed by a younger man. I admitted how I felt like half of me wanted to scream at Linda for hours, but the other half felt too exhausted to muster that kind of rage. Greg said, "Man, you gotta do what you gotta do. Don't let anyone guilt-trip you about it." Joel nodded, eyes serious. She crossed a line. A marriage line. Not a small thing. The rest of them agreed. I realized in that moment that I wasn't alone, and a small surge of strength flickered inside me. Even if Linda had found excitement with Ryan, I had my own anchors, people who knew me, respected me, believed in me. Maybe that's what real revenge looks like. You stand tall in your own truth while the other side faces the consequences of their actions. I eventually started sleeping in the bedroom again, if only because the guest bed was terrible for my back, and I was tired of skulking around my own house. Linda would lie rigid next to me, neither of us touching. At times, I'd wake up sweating in the middle of the night, heart pounding from a nightmare of them together. Then I'd stare at the ceiling until dawn, feeling the slow churn of my breath. She never tried to wrap an arm around me. I think she understood that boundary was gone forever. One Saturday, I woke up early and found Linda sitting on the porch steps, hugging herself against the morning chill. She wore an old robe and slippers. The sun rose in a faint pink glow, and dewdrops glittered on the lawn. She turned her face toward me as I approached. Her eyes were red, features etched with sorrow. I sat beside her, silent, feeling the cold concrete seep into my bones. She spoke first, voice ragged. "I'm losing everything, aren't I?" I stared at the sunrise. "Yes," I said. She gave a bitter smile, tears brimming. For a long moment, we sat in silence, only the sound of birds and distant traffic. "I don't have the right to ask for anything," she murmured. "But I don't want you to think I never loved you. I did. I do. I wish I could undo it. I wish I could undo that night. I was drunk, lonely, feeling." She cut off as her voice broke. A tear slid down her cheek. I studied her face, remembering her as the woman I married. Then I muttered, "No," meaning no, you can't fix it. She nodded, face crumpling. We sat there until the kids woke up. Then we went inside, made breakfast in near silence. The smell of scrambled eggs and toast filled the kitchen. The kids wandered in, oblivious, still half asleep. At some point, Linda forced a small smile for them. I stayed stoic. Once they left the room, she whispered, "I hate myself." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. That afternoon, I found a t-shirt in my closet. It was the one that read "Best Husband," a gift she gave me years ago as a joke. I stared at it, my jaw tightening. The cotton felt scratchy under my fingers. Suddenly, a wave of heat surged through me, the closest thing to raw anger I'd felt in weeks. I stormed out of the house and tossed it into the curbside trash bin. The lid slammed with a hollow thud. It was symbolic, sure, but it felt strangely cathartic. Linda saw me do it through the window. She pressed her hand to the glass, expression pained. I didn't look back. That night, she whispered in bed, "You're scaring me." I stared at the dark ceiling. "Yes," I said, because I scared myself too. I was trapped between heartbreak and rage, each fighting for dominance. Every part of me was tired. Tired of being the humiliated husband. Tired of feeling overshadowed by Ryan. And a single question bubbled up in my brain. What if I take my own form of revenge? But I didn't want to stoop to any destructive act. I didn't want to throw fists or sabotage anyone's job. Something deeper in me realized there was a better revenge. To free myself from this entire nightmare. Revenge is not a reckoning. It's a liberation. I remembered that phrase from somewhere. Now it made sense. Weeks later, the lawyer's process was close to done. We'd hammered out details. Linda tearfully signed the documents. One evening, she confronted me in the living room, while the kids slept over at a friend's. She asked, "So that's it? This is our story. We're finished." Her eyes were swollen, her hair disheveled. I studied her, thinking how I once found that messy look endearing. Now, it only reminded me how she used to ruffle it after being with him. "Yes," I said quietly. She took a shuddering breath, tears sliding down her cheeks. "And that's all I am to you now. A mistake. An ex-wife you hate." Her voice rose in desperation. "Don't I mean anything to you?" My stare was cold. "No," I replied. She let out a sob that felt like it rattled her entire body. I stood there, arms limp, the finality washing over me. I thought of all the years, all the moments of laughter, of love. They were drowned now in the memory of her betrayal. I gathered some clothes, stuffing them into a duffel bag. Linda followed me to the door, wiping tears. "Where are you going?" she asked, voice shaking. I paused, turned slightly. The overhead light shone in her eyes. "Away," I said. "Yes, I'm leaving." She opened her mouth, but no words came. I stepped onto the porch, letting the cool night air wrap around me. The stars were faint, but at least they were there, tiny points of light in a sea of darkness. I breathed in, feeling something inside me shift, uncoil. Revenge is not a reckoning. It's a liberation. I recalled that phrase and realized it was my truth. I walked down the driveway, duffel bag over my shoulder. Linda stood in the doorway, silhouette trembling. She called out, "David, please." I turned back. Our eyes locked. I remembered her message to her friend. He was 100 times more passionate. For a fleeting moment, I thought about how that comparison cut me to the core. Then I just shook my head. She whispered, "I'm sorry." And all I could do was walk away. I ended up at Greg's place for a few nights. My kids stayed with Linda, but I called them every day, told them, "I love you." The sense of physical distance from that house gave me room to breathe. My mind stopped whirling in chaos. I realized how I'd been living in a haunted space. Even the walls seemed to hold memories of Linda and Ran. Now, in Greg's quiet guest room, the only ghosts were in my head, and I could finally confront them. I told myself, she slept with him because of her own reasons, her own impulses. That doesn't erase my worth, or my future. I repeated it like a mantra. Over time, it sank in. A few days later, Linda texted, "Can we talk about the kids' schedules? They miss you." That was the one thing that could bring me back. My children. I went to the house, stood outside in the yard. The grass damp from a recent rain. She came out to meet me, wearing sweats, hair pulled back. She looked exhausted. "David," she said, quiet. "They're inside. You can talk to them." I nodded and went in. My kids rushed me with hugs. My daughter asked, "Daddy, are you home now?" My son clung to my leg. I felt that pang of guilt again. I crouched down, forced a reassuring smile. "No," I said gently, "but I'm here for you." They looked confused, but they squeezed me tight. Linda hovered, tears in her eyes. "They don't understand," she whispered. I sighed, glancing at her. No, I thought, they don't. But that's not my fault. I spoke quietly to them, explaining in the simplest terms that Daddy needed some time. They didn't love that answer, but they didn't push it too hard. Linda and I talked in hushed tones about the official custody plan. The tension was almost palpable, like a caged animal in the room. But I kept my composure. She tried to apologize again. I let out a quiet no and left it at that, because I couldn't accept her regret as currency to buy back what she broke. Weeks blurred. Paperwork finalized. We agreed to sell the house. She'd move into a smaller place nearby. I'd find my own apartment. Our kids would shuttle between us. All the typical motions of a modern divorce, but behind every step, I felt an undercurrent of bitterness. Because I knew who had driven me to this point. Linda and Ryan. The reality tasted sour, but I kept swallowing it. That was my last act of strength, enduring the bitterness without letting it define me forever. Finally, the day came when I packed up my final boxes. The sun was shining bright, crisp air drifting through open windows. Linda lingered by the kitchen counter, arms folded tight, watching as I sealed up the last pieces of my life in cardboard. She whispered, "You'll always be their father. I can't take that from you." I gave a single nod. Yes. She blinked, tears threatening to fall again. I didn't offer comfort. My vow of distance was unwavering. I hoisted the box, felt the weight pressing into my palms. Then I turned toward the door. She followed, voice trembling. "So this is it." I paused on the threshold. The house smelled of dust and leftover cleaning spray. This was the same doorway Ryan used to come through, the same threshold across which Linda had carried a secret I never suspected. A swirl of old memories flickered in my mind. The day we moved in after our wedding, our kids learning to walk in the living room, the countless dinners that ended in contented laughter, all overshadowed now by a betrayal that cut me deeper than any wound I'd known before. Linda's voice trembled again. "David, am I just your ex-wife now?" I turned slowly, letting my gaze sweep over her. She looked like a stranger wearing Linda's face, someone I no longer recognized. My voice came out low, steady. "No, you're an upgrade of yourself, one I can't roll back." She flinched, tears glistening. I gave a slow nod. "Yes, I'm done." She opened her mouth, but nothing emerged. I stepped outside, the day's sunlight hitting me square in the face, almost blinding. I set the box in my trunk, turned for one last glance at the house. Linda stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, tears streaking her cheeks. For a moment, I felt something stir in my chest. Not pity exactly, but a sense of final release. She made her choice. I'm making mine. I climbed into the car, turned the key, and heard the engine rumble. My breath caught in my throat, but I pushed through the tightness and shifted into gear. As I drove away, I glimpsed Linda in the rearview mirror, a small figure fading into the distance. The wind from the open window ruffled my hair, and the radio played some old country ballad about heartbreak. Fitting. Yet for the first time since the day I discovered her betrayal, I felt a weight lift off my chest. My body moved with more ease. My grip on the steering wheel loosened, blood flowing back into my fingertips. I sat straighter. Something in me that had been coiled tight for months finally let go. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't know if I'll fully heal, or if the scar will always throb at the thought of Ryan, that younger man with more vigor, more spontaneity, more passion. But as I left that driveway behind, I realized that was no longer my concern. My revenge wasn't about getting even. It wasn't about screaming at Linda or beating up Ryan. It was about standing up, walking out, and reclaiming my own life. In that sense, I had liberated myself. I drove on, the suburbs passing by in a blur of identical houses and manicured lawns. The road stretched ahead, lit by the fading afternoon sun. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and the faint tang of car exhaust. A sense of emptiness warred with a cautious hope inside me. The old me died back there, in the house where Linda admitted her affair. But a new me was emerging, unsteady, but upright. My shoulders relaxed, and I exhaled slowly, picturing my kids. I still had them. I still had my friendships, my career, my future. Linda's choice didn't define me. I wasn't just the betrayed husband. I was David, a man with a story, and that story was only beginning a new chapter. The sun angled down, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. I kept driving, heading to Greg's place first, maybe to share a meal, maybe to plan the next steps. Who knows, but I felt my spine straighten with every mile. Felt a kind of calm focus settle over me. My hand relaxed on the gearshift. The final shards of heartbreak clung to my thoughts, but they were manageable now. I had faced them, and I had chosen to stand. That was enough. I reached the intersection at the edge of the neighborhood, signaled left, and watched the light change from red to green. The engine purred, and I pressed the gas gently, the car rolling forward. My reflection stared back at me in the rear view, eyes still a bit haunted, but determined. My jaws unclenched, my posture tall. For the first time in months, I saw myself in that mirror, truly saw myself, and realized, I'm alive. I'm free. I'm moving on. I drove into the sun, letting the warmth fill the car's interior. And for one raw, honest moment, I felt at peace.